Yeah, so just to introduce myself, my name is Luke Charles. I'm a software developer at Tiski, Microsoft Gold Partner. And I recently did a similar presentation um, for Tiski. So that's why I'll be talking today. Um, and yeah, just the goal of this presentation, it's not really meant to be a history lesson or an attack on anyone. Um, the goal today is just to be informative and just help everyone here today understand sort of the Black experience and how you can all become better allies. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop myself or Trisha an email or get in touch on LinkedIn. There are no silly questions or wrong questions because really and truly, I think everyone should be more afraid of being ignorant rather than being wrong. So yeah, and if you do feel uncomfortable during this conversation, please just try and remember, it's like I said, it's not an attack. It's just more about to be informative, and again to just go over what we can all do, how we can all come together to sort of make the world a more equal place for everyone. So, without further ado, what is Black Lives Matter? Well, Black Lives Matter is a movement. It started out as a movement. It's a political and social movement that emphasizes basic human rights and equality for Black people, and also campaigning against various forms of racism. However, off the back of some police brutality incidents in the US, an organization was formed in 2013, which also advocates for nonviolent protest against incidents of police brutality against Black people. But they also campaign for all of the aforementioned issues as well. I think the key point is that it's not Black Lives Matter more than, it's not only Black Lives Matter. It's just that systematically, Black lives have never mattered. So it's about dismantling the white supremacy which is created. And to quote Ben and Jerry's global head of activism, Christopher Miller, a racist, prejudiced system and culture that has treated Black bodies as the enemy from the beginning. And as we can see from the police brutality and the inequality that still exists in our society today, there's still a great deal of change that needs to happen in order to make that statement true. So that's why today we'll be covering three main areas: police brutality, general racism and discrimination, and finally, systemic and institutional racism. So let's go into police brutality. Police brutality is defined as when officers exercise undue or excessive force against a person. And this includes physical or verbal harassment, physical or mental injury, property damage, but death is one of the saddest forms, of course. So according to the Washington Post, last year in 2019, 1,000 people were shot. 250 were Black. So that's over a quarter of the people shot. However, according to the 2019 US Census, just 13% of the US population is Black. Meaning that based on these figures, this means that you're twice as likely to be shot by the police and killed if you're Black. And what's worse is that 99% of police killings between 2013 and 2019 have not resulted in officers being charged with a crime. Now, frankly, these figures are unacceptable. Firstly, the fact that 1,000 people have lost their lives at the hands of police is unacceptable, especially when we consider that there are many Western countries that have proven it's possible to police citizens without the use of firearms and lethal force. But it's even worse when you consider that you're twice as likely to be shot and killed just because of the color of your skin. And this means that simple things, simple encounters with the police mean completely different things based on the color of your skin. For example, a traffic stop, if you're not Black in the US, a traffic stop is simply, you get pulled over, the police will have a look at your license and, you go about your merry way. Whereas if you're a Black person, there's a significantly higher risk of being harassed, beaten, or even just shot and killed, even after you've been asked to reach for your license. How fortunately, Black Lives Matter have a solution, and it's called Campaign Zero. And it's their 10-point plan to try and reduce and ultimately get rid of police brutality. And it includes things such as limiting the use of police force and putting certain standards in place around when and how it can be used, independently investigating and prosecuting police misconduct, increased body cams and filming of police activity, and more training around implicit bias, relationship-based policing, de-escalation, and minimizing the use of force. However, how much better or worse do we think the UK is? It's true that we don't carry firearms in this country, it's illegal, and the police don't really walk with guns. However, Black people are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched, according to The Guardian. And according to the BBC, the police are 4 times more likely to use force on Black people. Now, those two statistics combined make me fearful for my safety. And it makes me wonder what our statistics would be like if the police in this country did carry firearms. And it just makes me fear for my safety as a young Black man myself, with Black friends and my family as well. You know, these kind of statistics mean that, you know, sometimes as Black people, you know, we have conversations in our households that sometimes other families may not even consider having. Like, for example, I play American football. So a couple of weeks ago, I was driving to a training session with some friends. And before I left, my dad flagged me down and he said, "Hey, before we go, just be careful. If you get pulled over, you know, be respectful. You know, it's yes, officer, no, officer. If they ask for anything, I know you know your rights, but if they ask for anything, just hand it over. You know, just don't give them a reason to become aggressive." And really and truly, that's a conversation that no one should have to have. But I know from talking with friends and other family members, that is a very common conversation in Black households. And if it's not about sort of interactions with the police, then it's about clothing, you know, what we wear, and how to behave when we're around others. You know, don't have your hood up if it's dark, etc. There is racial profiling in police, in the way citizens are policed in this country. And then that brings us on to general racism and discrimination. So racism in the US, it seems to be more overt. You know, you openly see people weaponizing their privilege. Use of racial slurs is a lot more common. However, UK racism is a little bit more subtle. And this is because of explicit bias and implicit bias. Explicit bias is when prejudice that is conscious leads to actions that you are aware of. So, for example, again, going back to the US, there was a KKK rally in Charlottesville last year. You know, they hate Black people, they know they hate Black people, and they want everyone else to know that they hate Black people. Whereas implicit bias is a little bit more subtle. It's prejudice that turns into an unconscious action. So an example of that might be, you know, someone who may not be openly racist or discriminatory, but they still clutch their bag a little bit tighter when a Black person approaches them on the same side of the road. You know, and these sort of unconscious actions manifest as microaggressions. And we see them all around us, and they may even go unnoticed. So, for example, take these 2 articles from the Daily Mail. This is a prime example of microaggressions. So as you can see, we've got 2 articles about 2 young footballers. At the time, they were both at similar stages in their career. And as you can see from the dates, they were released at, you know, similar times as well. It's the same year, I guess. You can see that Phil Foden, on one hand, is referred to as a starlet for buying a £2 million home for his mum, whereas Tosin Adarabiyoyo who also plays for the same team, is a similar age, is said to have splashed out on a mansion, implying that he sort of bought the house out of vanity. And they decided to bring up the fact that he's never started a Premier League match. I think Paul Hurst from the Times put it quite nicely and summarized the whole situation. He says, type the name Tosin Adarabioyo into Google, and the first search recommendation that comes up has nothing to do with his profession. That is because in January last year, the Mail Online published a story about Adarabioyo, then 20 years old, splashing out on a 2.25 million Cheshire mansion, even though he had never featured in the English Premier League. What the article failed to mention was that Adarabioyo spent many years as a single parent bringing up her 3 children. For some reason, the Daily Mail neglected to bring up this fact. And again, like I said, this is a prime example of a microaggression. So a microaggression, the dictionary definition, is an incident that can be regarded as an indirect or subtle discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. So how can we avoid microaggressions then? How can we avoid doing this? Well, it's about getting real with ourselves, and through doing more learning about the experiences of others, it will allow us to check our own biases and then take meaningful action to mitigate and understand them. We need to ask ourselves difficult questions such as, do my actions and words truly reflect the value of inclusion in my day-to-day sort of actions with people? So in work, when I deal with my friends, socially, in all aspects of our lives. That's how we can sort of avoid microaggressions. But the thing with microaggressions is that they appear in all areas of society, in sort of the organizations we work in, health, education, and this sort of takes us into institutional and systemic racism. Now, institutional racism is a form of racism which can be embedded as normal practice within a society or an organization. Therefore, it can lead to such issues, it can lead to discrimination, in major sectors such as the justice system, employment, housing, healthcare, education, but in particular, the media. Now, why have I singled out the media? The media is notorious for perpetuating a negative stereotype of Black people. For example, the Media Matters, which is a non-profit organization that is dedicated to sort of correcting misinformation in the US media, they did a study over a period of 4 months covering 4 major news stations, including CBS, NBC, and ABC. And the study was focused on the way these stations reported crime in the New York locality. According to the New York City Police Department statistics, Black people were suspects in 54% of murders, 55% of thefts, 49% of assaults. However, in the station's coverage of these stories, the suspects were Black in 74% of murder stories, 84% of theft stories, and 73% of assault stories. So it's clear to see that Black people in this case are being grossly overrepresented in relation to crime. And this again perpetuates the negative stereotype of deviancy within Black people and criminality. But the real issue is that this narrative is unconsciously accepted by society. And this can have a devastating effect on young people and children, which can be seen in the following video.
Quale bambola è bianca?
Can you hear?
Quale bambola è nera? Quale delle due è bella?
Questa.
Qual è quella bella? Qual è quella brutta? E qual è quella buona? Quale è cattiva? Qual è buona?
Lei.
Perché è buona?
Perché ha gli occhi celesti.
Quale è cattiva? Perché è cattiva?
Perché è tutto nero.
E qual è la bambola che ti somiglia di più? Quale bambola è nera?
Mi hai offeso. Tu. Perché mi hai chiamato nero?
Perché?
Mi offendi perché altri bambini mi hanno offeso con cattiveria.
No, io non ho usato nessuna cattiveria.
Quello mi sta guardando storto.
That video is that video is quite hard to watch. Not just emotionally, but it was freezing a little bit as well. But I think the link has just been posted in the chat, so you guys can also view that again after the presentation and after the quiz. But I think there were two moments in there that really stand out to me. You know, when the girl at the end sort of says that the black doll is bad, and then she's asked to select which doll looks like her. That's heartbreaking. And you know, even the girl at the very end as well. You know, here in this country, you know, if someone says, "Oh, you know, you're black, aren't you?" or you know, "Hey, Luke's the black one." Personally, I don't see that as an issue, and I think generally it's okay to refer to people as, you know, from their color. However, that girl in whatever country she's in, she's so used to being referred to as black when being made fun of. Simply hearing the doll referred to as black offended her, and that's really, really sad. And it's, again, it goes back to these negative stereotypes that tend to follow us as black people all throughout our lives. And it starts in school and it goes right throughout our lives, all the way through our careers as well. For example, 2011 research by the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills found that black applicants for university had the lowest predicted grade accuracy, with only 39.1% of predicted grades being accurate, while their white classmates had the highest at 53%. Now, this creates issues for black people getting into potentially good universities, or specifically Russell Group universities, because universities tend to make their initial offers based on predicted grades, and then they confirm those offers once the students have actually achieved those grades. So this means that if predicted grades for black students are not just inaccurate, but also under-predicted, these top universities they're not even going to look at us as black people in general. And this then affects our employability and how competitive we are in the job market. And according to research from the University of Oxford, as Black people and as an ethnic minority, we can't afford to not be competitive in the job market, because it takes us, we have to send more than Black people and ethnic people that come from ethnic backgrounds have to send more than 80% of applications, 80% more applications, sorry, to get a positive response from an employer compared to a white person of British origin. So not only is it difficult for us to find ways to increase our employability by going to good universities, but we also have to work twice as hard to get a favorable response from a potential employer. And then once we're in a job, you might not be surprised to hear that white British workers earn on average 3.8% more than all other ethnic groups. And that gap rises to as much as 20% for certain ethnic groups, according to the Financial Times. And because of this, this leads us to what I think is the most important point, which is home ownership. Because obviously, if we're being underpaid, it's more difficult to get jobs, and it's more difficult for us to get into good universities. Home ownership just becomes very, very difficult for Black people. It becomes almost impossible. And that's why Black home ownership is at just 20%, according to gov.uk. And in comparison, in every socio-economic group and age group, white British households were more likely to own their own homes than all ethnic minority households combined. Why is this important though? Owning a home is a sign of wealth, and it's wealth that can be passed down, and that's called generational wealth. And to be quite frank, wealth creates opportunities. It creates opportunities for further investment. If you own your house, it's far easier to then buy another house for either your children or as an investment opportunity. You know, having a house, you can free up funds to invest in businesses or to support your family as well. There are lots of things that you can do with the money that comes with owning your own house. And quite frankly, Black people and other ethnic minorities just don't have the opportunities, because we're not able to get to that point where we have that wealth because of the unconscious bias that puts all these hurdles in our way to become successful. So what can we do to help? Well, it starts with waking up to the fact that these negative narratives and stereotypes that are perpetuated in the media are just not true. And it also helps if we do our part to sort of, if we see anyone personally perpetuating those stereotypes as well, calling them out on it, calling people out on their behavior and their discriminatory behavior. But then after that, what we need to do is apply pressure to organizations that we work in and that we're members of to make things better for everyone. And applying pressure to the people in power within these organizations to make things better for everyone. So for example, if you're in a team and you feel like it lacks diversity, say something. If you're a teacher in a school and you've seen that a Black student has had their grades underpredicted, say something. That's the only way that we're going to be able to create change within these large organizations and tackle systemic and institutional racism. But what else can we do to help? How can we help more in general? Well, there are quite a few petitions and charities that we can donate to. There's Black Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter UK. There is also Black Minds Matter that we've just spoken about today. We've also got the official George Floyd Memorial Fund too. And on change.org, there's a petition titled Justice for George Floyd that has gained over 10 million signatures. And there's also a petition for Belly Mujinga as well, calling for justice for her too. But what other ways can we help other than just the donating and the signing a petition? Well, it's educating ourselves. It's not being afraid to ask questions, no matter how difficult they may be. And again, like I said at the beginning, it's about being more afraid of staying ignorant than being wrong. You know, there's just no excuse for staying ignorant anymore. With the internet, there's thousands and millions of articles out there on the subject. And if you don't like the internet, there's many books on the subject as well. For example, there's Why I Don't Talk to White People About Race Anymore. You know, I think that one was a bestseller. And if you don't like reading, you can go on Audible, then listen to these books. And if you just don't like books at all, you can go on Netflix, and there's a couple of shows. That sort of show the difficulties that Black people face in our day and age now. For example, Dear White People and Blackish. But once we've done all this education, what we need to do is now apply it to ourselves. We need to reflect on our own mindsets, continue having these conversations at home, sharing these conversations, sharing what we're learning with family members, and having these conversations in our own households, in our social circles and groups as well, and enlightening everyone around us as well. And once we've done that, it's about using what we've learned to recognize when others are being prejudiced or ignorant and challenging their behavior as well. That's the biggest way we're going to make a change. But why is now the time? Why is now the time? People have been shot in America before by police. It's not a new thing. But I think what people realized with George Floyd is that there are no excuses anymore. There's absolutely no reason why a human being would need to kneel on another human being's neck for over 9 minutes, many of which were after he had passed out. There's absolutely no excuse for it. And I feel as though in many other situations, people have looked for excuses. For example, Breonna Taylor, it was dark, the police couldn't see. He supposedly maybe he robbed someone, maybe he was running away from someone, maybe he wasn't just a jogger. I think with George Floyd, people finally realized that police brutality is real, racial discrimination is real, and that there are no excuses for it. It caused global outrage because we all felt it, particularly as Black people. We look at George Floyd and we see ourselves, we see our families, we see our friends, and we think, that could have been me, that could have been my father, my brother, my sister, my mother. It could have been any of us. But unfortunately, it just so happened to be him. And that's why now is the time for change. And that's why Black Lives Matter. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Luke, for that. I mean, I think that says it all. That's a really, really good factual explanation as to what the movement is about. Resources have been provided. So what Luke has actually just said, all the slides, these are all the resources, the references. So this is actually based on fact and can actually be backed up by these references. So it is something that is experienced by basically Black people and minorities across the world. What's happening in the US, as Luke says, does happen in the UK as well. It's just more covert. So hopefully what we've just heard will open up a lot more discussions in terms of how we as a community can make a change, make a difference, and actually become better allies towards the Black community and the minority community.
Just to follow everything up as well, I've attached sort of a few Black Lives Matter resources in the chat as well, for everyone to take a look at if they want to do any further reading as well. But like I said, thanks for listening, everyone. And I think Trisha has got my details on the slide deck. So if you want to get in contact, please feel free to.